Oregon football tore up the recruiting trail in May, and today we're looking back at the month that was on the Ducks Dish podcast. And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. It is Wednesday, May 31st, 2023. Just in case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Excited to have you guys along for today's show. Excited to dive into some more recruiting talk. If you want Oregon football recruiting, Oregon football coverage, I'm your guy. Excited to have you along, whether you're listening on podcast platform or on YouTube. Your first view of the day over on Oregon football. Max Torres kindly ask that you hit those like and subscribe buttons and leave me a comment. Let me know how you're feeling about Oregon football recruiting. So here's the rundown for today's show. Like I mentioned in the open, we're taking a look at the month that was in May for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks on the recruiting trail, adding 4 new commitments in the 2024 class and even a commitment in the 2025 class. Stay tuned to the end of the episode for that one. So Oregon got things started in the month of May with a commitment from 2024 Baltimore, Maryland, St. Francis Academy cornerback Ify Obidegwu. Obidegwu is the latest All-American defensive back who is headed to Eugene to play his college football for Dan Lanning and the Ducks. He is an Under Armour All-American caliber player, plays a national schedule with the St. Francis squad. I want to say that they're the Panthers, but I'm not 100% sure, so someone might have to check that one for me. But Obidegwu chose the Ducks from a Final 7 that consisted of Oregon, Alabama, Maryland, Michigan, USC, Tennessee, and Ohio State. So Dan Lanning and the Ducks going across the country to land a highly coveted defensive back in Ify Obidegwu, and it was an important one for the Ducks. Why? I'm going to tell you why. It's really because Oregon hit the position cornerback so hard in the 2023 class that I think that the positions, the number of spots that they have at cornerback in the 2024 class are limited. So if you're taking a commitment from somebody like Ify Obidegwu, probably want to make sure it's a pretty good player. And Demetrius Martin definitely found himself a stud of a defensive back here in Ify Obidegwu. Tall, lengthy guy, really fits the bill for what Dan Lanning wants in his corners. Like I've talked about before, listed on 247 at 6'1", 185 pounds, top 100 player in the country, number 11 at his position, and the number 2 player in the state of Maryland. Also the headliner now in Oregon's 2024 recruiting class, narrowly edging out Aaron Flowers, the safety commit from Forney, Texas. Obidegwu is rated a 4-star, 0.9517. So heck of a way to start the month for Dan Lanning and the Ducks, especially going across the country, one of the nation's premier high school programs. St. Francis plays talented programs from across the country, whether you're looking at DeSoto and the Dallas area out there in Texas. They absolutely smoked them last year. And then everyone is looking towards the 2023 schedule when the modern day Monarchs have to travel across the country to Baltimore to face St. Francis Academy. So definitely a headliner of a game early on in the 2023 high school football season. But this was a commitment that the Ducks definitely needed in terms of just making sure that things stay solid at cornerback, and another phenomenal job done by Demetrius Martin and the rest of the cornerbacks, coaching staff, and the rest of the defensive staff at Oregon with Dan Lanning and company, just going against some really heavy hitters, blue blood programs. If he took a couple of different trips to Oregon, I think in January and in March. So they were able to, stay on out. Trying to work with my mic here as it keeps telling me that it's disconnected, even though I haven't touched it. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and keep rolling with the episode. It's been good to me lately, so hopefully we'll keep rolling with it. But yeah, I love the Obidegwu commitment. love the physical build that the Ducks are getting here in their defensive back. You're getting a guy with a pretty high floor and a high ceiling. I think is the case here with Obidegwu, getting another talented defensive back from a national powerhouse. And I think that the Ducks were able to be selective here at corner, and Obidegwu was someone that they deemed, quality enough to, accept his commitment, and just a really, really good pickup for Dan Lanning and company. Going to have to battle to keep him committed, of course, in the 2024 recruiting class, because just because you announce a verbal commitment doesn't mean that other schools are going to let up. Obidegwu has since scheduled his official visit to Oregon for June 23rd, which is the big official visit weekend for Dan Lanning and the Ducks this summer as they look to, fill out the rest of this 2023 recruiting class. Obidegwu will be joined in Eugene that weekend by 2024 Oregon cornerback target Dakota Fields out of Gardena Serra. He is one of the biggest names that the Ducks are recruiting in the defensive backfield, specifically at corner. You also got names like Xadavien Brown, Chris Johnson Jr., Miles Lockhart, to name a few. But Obidegwu is a huge name, and the Ducks will have the headliner of their class in town June 23rd. Ducks kept things rolling on the recruiting trail here in the month of May when they stayed in the Baltimore area to land a commitment from Obidegwu's teammate, that is quarterback Michael Van Buren, who chose the Ducks from a top three that consisted of Oregon, Maryland, and Penn State. How did this recruitment kind of unfold? How did the Ducks get this commitment from Under Armour All-American quarterback Michael Van Buren? Well, it was an interesting one. The last month or so leading up to Van Buren's commitment, which was originally set for July 8th, which speaks to the work that the Ducks coaching staff and recruiting staff was able to do in this recruitment with Michael Van Buren, getting him to move up his commitment date and get in the fold before summer even gets here. I think that's one of the biggest pluses by landing commitments from Michael Van Buren, as well as Phoenix Sunny Slope quarterback Luke Moga. The Ducks already have their signal callers in the fold for the 2024 class, and they can head into the critical summer recruiting period with those two guys serving as peer recruiters for them. So Michael Van Buren, it wasn't always Oregon for Michael Van Buren. The Ducks had been recruiting him for quite a while. They were definitely playing the long game in that recruitment, but Penn State was a longtime leader in Van Buren's recruitment. Numerous trips out to it's not College Station. I know that's Texas A&M, or it's Happy Valley. Numerous trips out to Happy Valley. Obviously, a much easier trip for Van Buren to make than Eugene, coming out of the Baltimore area. But really, I think the tide turned in Will Stein in Oregon's favor in the month of April. Why is that? Well, it's pretty simple. They got him on campus in Eugene twice. And the second time was for the spring game, Oregon's marquee recruiting event of the year. And obviously that momentum, the excitement, all that stuff was palpable. I mean, if you look at Van Buren's commitment video, it does look like he was able to kind of share that moment with Dan Lanning and Will Stein, during the visit, announcing his commitment to the staff, but obviously keeping it under wraps until May 20th. So that was obviously a massive recruiting win for Dan Lanning and company. Like I said, wrapping up the quarterback position. Will Stein continues to prove his worth as a recruiter on Dan Lanning's staff, landing his third quarterback commitment without having coached a single game at Oregon. I think that speaks a lot to the message that he is selling to these recruits, and the faith that they have in him as a coach and as a developer of talent at the quarterback position. Oregon has now, 4 solid options to take over as Bo Nix's successor, with Ty Thompson, Austin Novosad, the 2023 quarterback signing that Stein flipped from Baylor. Then you also have Van Buren and Moga. It makes sense to reason that both are going to be early enrollees. I can't confirm that for Van Buren, but Luke Moga did tell me that he's on track to enroll early with the Ducks. So Oregon goes across the country again to land one of their 2 signal callers, I should say, here in the 2024 class. And Van Buren has been a vocal recruiter already, on social media with guys like Brandon Baker, the 5-star offensive tackle out of Modern Day, as well as Dejon Riggs out of the Washington, D.C. area, St. John's College, closer to Van Buren's home area of the DMV. So this was a really, really big commitment for the Ducks. I think that Van Buren is the more polished and refined passer and overall quarterback prospect of the two. If we're going to kind of get into the comparison of him and Moga, it's only natural that that's going to happen. I really like both quarterbacks, but it's pretty clear that Van Buren has the more, the better body of work, I should say. Moga started playing tackle football his freshman year, and just in 2022 played his first full season as the team's starting. This microphone just doesn't want to deal with me, folks. But I'm keeping a close eye on it, so hopefully the outages are minimal here with that. But just to kind of wrap up Van Buren. Love the commitment. I think that he definitely has a chance to play early. I'm not going to predict that or saying I expect it, but with the body of work that he has, getting some really high level coaching, playing a national schedule, camp circuit, I think there's plenty of reason to think that he has a high football IQ, a great feel for the game, is a student of the game. He's going to be somebody that elevates this Oregon quarterback room for years to come once he gets to Eugene. And then the Ducks stayed hot on May 20th when they landed their second commitment of the day. All right, well, we're gonna change things up here, folks. Sorry, I couldn't. That's like 4 disconnects in the last minute. I don't know what's up with this mic. I definitely need to get a new one, but we're going to roll with the laptop mic for now. But the Ducks stayed hot on the recruiting trail on Saturday, May 20th, landing a commitment from 2024 Oklahoma defensive lineman Xadavien Sims. Xadavien Sims chose the Ducks from a top 5 that also included schools like Vanderbilt, Michigan State, Oklahoma, schools like that. So this was a huge recruiting win for Dan Lanning, Tony Tuioti, and Tosh Lapoy going into the state of Oklahoma and snagging a commitment from the state's top-ranked player in the 2024 class. Definitely has to feel good for this defensive line staff, as the Ducks already had a commitment from 2024 St. Louis area defensive lineman Tioni Gray, who they flipped from the Missouri Tigers earlier this year. So Tony Tuioti continues to, show that he's got what it takes to be a high-level recruiter. Also got to throw in a shout-out to Tony Washington, who works with the defensive line staff over there, Oregon. Definitely one of the Duck greats in recent years. He recovered that Jameis Winston fumble in the Rose Bowl. But this was a big win for Oregon. They really made up a tremendous amount of ground, on schools like Oklahoma and Michigan State. I think those were the 2 real contenders in this recruitment that the Ducks had to go toe-to-toe with. Tony Tuioti flew out to Oklahoma just to show Xadavien that he was a priority for him in this 2024 recruiting class. And, Xadavien checks all the boxes from a physical standpoint, right? 6'3", 275 pounds on the 247 Sports recruiting profile there. Really athletic guy. I love how strong he is, and he's just able to get guys off of him at the point of attack and really stay involved in the backfield. I think that this is a commitment that comes with a tremendous amount of upside and positional versatility. And I think if you're Dan Lanning and Tosh Lapoy, Tony Tuioti, you're looking at the defensive line haul for Oregon just between the 2023 and 2024 classes. And it's got to be hard not to be licking your chops, because the 2023 defensive line haul at Oregon was probably one of the best that we've seen in recent memory. You got Johnny Bowens, you got, Jaden Moore, Mateo Uyunglele, Tavita Pomee, who else? Terrence Green. You have so many big-time talents along the defensive line, and you're just bringing in some huge body types. Amari Washington, Michael Gardner. I think that the Ducks are really upgrading the defensive line position, and they're making it a priority for a good reason, because most of their guys are going to be gone along the defensive line from the 2023 season by the time guys like Davian Sims and Tioni Gray are ultimately getting on campus. So I think that there's a lot of expectations for that 2023 class. And when you sign that many guys, Oregon's lucky to be in the position that they are right now, because not only do you have a bunch of vets coming back for the 2023 season, all these 2023 studs that you signed along the defensive line can learn from Jordan Burch, can learn from Popu Amavai, Taki Taimani, Keon Ware-Hudson, Casey Rogers. They can learn from all these guys that are coming back to Oregon for one last ride. So that way, when it comes time for them to, ride off into the sunset and hopefully go to the NFL, they'll feel good, turning things over to the young pups that they brought in. And then they can even, make that better by going through the transfer portal and adding some more guys between the 23 and the 24 seasons. So a lot's going to have to happen. A lot is going to happen between now and the end of the 23 season. But there's definitely a reason to be confident that Dan Lanning knows the power of the transfer portal and has done a great job using it to, address needs and ultimately try to get this team where they ultimately want to go. So Xadavien Sims is just another example of Oregon using their national recruiting brand, their national reach, to go wherever they want to take the best players out of these states not named Oregon. That's really what they're doing. I mean, they did that in California in 2019, I want to say, when they signed Kayvon Thibodeau. That worked out pretty well, but I think that's really exciting to see them go into Oklahoma. I don't think they've gotten anybody from Oklahoma since Miles Slusher in the 2019 recruiting class. He ended up at Oklahoma, I believe. But Oklahoma is not, or Arkansas rather. He ended up at Arkansas. But Oklahoma is not a state that Oregon has recruited particularly heavily of late. Here on the recruiting trail. But it's a state that they're definitely tapping into. And, it's good to be involved and have those coaches that will travel all over the country. And just a phenomenal job for the Ducks to make up ground and ultimately close with Xadavien Sims, another big-time trench talent that is going to help the Ducks get to the next level and develop that depth that you so desperately need at every position, but specifically at defensive line. I think that's definitely an area the Ducks have been lacking. Not necessarily so much in the run game, but just finding guys that can knock back the line of scrimmage and generate that pass rush even from the interior. So I think Xadavien Sims is a great get, and he helps the Ducks check off that box moving forward. Lots of big names that Oregon is still going after here along the defensive line, the trenches, front seven. You got Elijah Rushing, Jordan Ross, Colin Simmons, Aiden Breland, Williams Nwaneri, just to name a few. So plenty of big-time talent still on the board. Elijah Rushing begins his official visit to Oregon, I believe, this Friday, June 2nd. So that's an important visit for the Ducks, no doubt about it. So let's get into the fourth commitment for Dan Lanning and the Ducks in the month of May. Hope the audio is hanging in there for you guys. We're talking about Dylan Gresham, 2024 wide receiver from San Jacinto, California, out here in Southern California. This was about an hour and a half drive for yours truly. Went out to be on the scene covering this commitment that the Ducks got over the likes of Washington and Arizona. And the story with Dylan Gresham, he took a pair of visits out to Oregon and really felt like Oregon was home for him after that most recent visit. I believe it came in April, not for the spring game, but a little bit earlier than that. So Junior Adams, what do we know about Junior Adams? He's a California guy, West Coast guy. So no surprise to see him going back to his home state, the Golden State, to find another talented wide receiver to add in the fold in 2024. He joins Jordan Anderson from Newport Harbor, as well as Tysier Denmark out of the Philadelphia area, to now make 3 wide receiver commits for Junior Adams and company in the 24 class. And I think some of the things that make Dylan Gresham special, obviously you have the playmaking ability, the things that he's able to do with the ball in his hands after the catch truly make him special. But speaking with his coach on scene at the commitment ceremony and seeing him in action in person on the 7-on-7 circuit is the guy's acceleration and his top speed. This is a guy that can get to his top speed, get to that top gear in just about 3 steps. And what does that do? It allows him to get behind defenses when it comes time to make big plays. And I think he's another speedster that the Ducks are really happy to have in this recruiting class. He's listed on 247 Sports at 6 foot, 175 pounds, 4-star caliber guy. Mainly had a Pac-12 recruitment. Miami hopped in the boat late with an offer, but I think that this was a West Coast guy. This is a West Coast guy through and through. And you have to give credit to Junior Adams and company when it comes to recruiting a guy like Dylan Gresham at the wide receiver spot. I'll be honest, not a whole lot that I saw at least going on in San Jacinto. So, maybe not a place that is really on the map from a national perspective. Certainly easy to get lost in the mix in Southern California. When you have the Trinity League, you have San Diego, you have so much talent in the Southern California area, but Dylan Gresham is a special one. And now he's going to be suiting up to play his college football for the Ducks. So definitely got to be excited about this addition and what it means for the Ducks. A guy that just has, serious burners. And I think he's only going to get better. Pretty good route runner, but I think there's still some room to grow there for Dylan Gresham here in, as he heads into his final year of high school ball, looking to go out with a bang in his senior season. Real crafty guy. I think him and Jordan Anderson are definitely going to hit it off. I think that they have a previous, history and relationship to each other, friendship. So Oregon's making it a priority to get some of these top guys in the Southern California area. Some of the people that I've talked to around this recruitment, we're just kind of surprised that USC was never a major player here, seeing how important it's been for Lincoln Riley to get top SoCal guys, Xavier Jordan, Mekhi Lemon, just a couple examples since he took over the helm leading the Trojans. But Oregon's wide receiver room is really coming into focus here in the 24 class. Jack Ressler, modern day wide receiver, he told me he's working from a final two of Boise State and Oregon, and he expects to make his college decision in early June. Just announced that he would be taking his official visit to Oregon on June 23rd. So again, that big weekend. I logged my prediction in favor of the Ducks for Jack Ressler, so keep an eye out on him. And then you also have names like Ryan Pelham out of Long Beach Milliken. He's going to be taking his visit to Oregon, his Oregon official visit that same weekend. USC also going to get an official visit from Pelham. And then you got Jeremiah McClellan out of the St. Louis area, Christian Brothers. Another really, really talented wide receiver. He was on campus for the spring game. So Oregon's staying involved with top wideouts all throughout the country. I know they're trying to kind of stay in the mix for Ryan Wingo, but that's going to be a tough one. Also out of St. Louis, big-time target for programs as well, like Georgia and Tennessee. And then you also have Terry Bussey, who's number one athlete, I believe, in the 24 class, big-time guy out of Texas, plays some running back, plays some receiver for you, can do a little bit of everything. So Oregon's got, let me see, they have 14 commitments as of this recording. As they kind of wind down the month of May and head into a very important month of June on the recruiting trail with a lot of big official visitors, like I said, coming onto campus all throughout the month. And a lot of these guys, a lot of top targets nationally are looking to wind down their recruitments and, ultimately make decisions before their senior season starts because they want to just be able to focus on ball, and maybe they're overwhelmed by the recruiting process and they just want to get it over with. So the last guy we're talking about today comes in the 2025 recruiting class. Had a busy weekend, so wasn't able to cover him too much, but we're talking about Chavez Sandman Thompson, a 2025 interior offensive lineman from UGally High School in Melbourne, Florida. Hopefully I'm saying that right. We'll have to see. Listed on the 247 Sports profile website at 6'1", 270 pounds. So not quite as tall as we've seen previous offensive linemen coming through Oregon, but, committed to Oregon, and Alik Terry had 14 reported scholarship offers. Alik Terry was obviously the main recruiter here, seeing that he is himself a Florida native. So that makes sense. Definitely, got to give some credence to him and, trust his feel for things from a talent perspective. He's not rated just yet, but I think the 25 class hasn't been a big focus, so we're still kind of waiting for ratings to come out there. But you have other schools that were in the mix here. You had Florida State, Florida Atlantic, Indiana, Iowa State, Maryland, Mississippi State, Tennessee, and West Virginia. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy who continues to develop and continues to see more schools try to get in the mix. I think he definitely plays with a good physicality and good tenacity. Maybe needs to be better at finishing his blocks. I think that he's not necessarily a refined finished product by any means, but you wouldn't expect that. He's got 2 more years of high school ball to play. I think that he does tend to be a little bit high in his blocking. Maybe doesn't play with the best leverage at all times, but I think this is a great start to Oregon's class, and kind of interesting to see that Oregon has 2 commits in their 2025 recruiting class, and they both come from the Sunshine State. They both come from Florida, with Dallas Wilson, the Tampa Bay Tech wide receiver, being the headliner right now, 6'3", 180 pounds. He's ranked a top 100 prospect nationally in the 2025 class. Ducks have the number 12 class in 2025 right now, and I love this commitment for maybe a bit of a different reason. I love this commitment because it shows that Dan Lanning and the Ducks are pushing ahead into the 2025 class. Important to have recruiting momentum in the most current class, the 24 class right now, rising seniors, but also important to be looking ahead, to be getting work done ahead of time in those 25 classes. I'm not saying it's an absolute requirement, but we haven't really had a time where we've seen Oregon really recruit, quote unquote, ahead of schedule. I think that's what some of these blue blood programs, you have Ohio State, you have, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, schools like that. They are able to, Georgia, they are able to make some noise on the recruiting trail and do it early. And I think that that's a great sign for Oregon. Interesting story with Sandman here is that he actually committed to Oregon sight unseen, has yet to take a trip out to Oregon. But one of my good buddies, John Garcia, who now is over at Rivals, he reported that he's expecting Thompson to get out to the state of Oregon for his first trip to see the Ducks this summer. So it won't be too long before Sandman Thompson takes his first visit out to Oregon. Alik Terry getting a good one in the fold early here in the 2025 recruiting class for the Ducks. As May kind of comes to an end and things are only going to get more intense. Things are only going to heat up more on the recruiting trail. So make sure you guys stay tuned in to ducksdigest.com. Stay tuned into the Ducks Dish podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. As we kind of start to wind down here, important to remember, lock in with me on social media at mtorres sports on Twitter, as well as on Instagram, and then at Oregon Football Max Torres on YouTube. Do me a favor, you guys, share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, with other Duck fans. Only going to be ramping things up as we get into June here. Going to be a very busy month for Oregon on the recruiting trail, and wouldn't be surprised if there are some commitments that we see in the month of June. But until next time, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to talk some Ducks with me, some Duck football, some Cruton. I love it and can't get enough of it. And until next time, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.